Hi everyone, I'm Monique, welcome to New Bear. Some of you may know that I recently started hand dyeing my own thread. I dye both plain and variegated colours in a range of different sizes. It is going to take some time for me to build up my colourways, but there's a few on Etsy already, so make sure you check it out. There's a link in the description box down below if anyone wants to have a look. Now, like most suppliers, I ship my thread as skeins. I may have received a message or two from people who didn't realise this is how you purchase hand-dyed thread. And now they think they're stuck because they're unsure how to use it. The first thing I'm going to say is I'm very happy to wind skeins into centre pull balls for you. However, you do need to let me know that that's something you'd like me to do. So when you're on my Etsy store, you can either use the contact button to send me an email, or after clicking on the thread you'd like and selecting the size, length and quantity, scroll to the bottom of the screen to the Message Monique button. This is where you can leave your message for me. So why all the fuss? What does it matter if we have a skein instead of a ball? We're about to look at the difference. We're also going to look at how to set up a skein and the options we have for winding a ball. This is how your skein will arrive. Skeins vary in length, but it doesn't change the way we need to work with it. Cut the tag off and untwist it so it opens to a big loop. Everything's under control at the moment because we still have these holding ties on. But if I remove the ties, which I will need to do so I can work with the thread, if I remove the ties without having anything to keep the loop open and keep the sides separated, as soon as I try to do anything with it, if I pull on this end like I would if I was trying to use it, it's going to clump and knot together. The sides will pull in on themselves, it's going to twist and tangle. Same thing happens if I try to take the thread from over the top. It's not going to end well. You're going to end up in a bit of a mess. So this beautiful orderly skein will quickly turn into a beautiful tangled heap. We can work from a skein provided we set it up properly, meaning we have a way to keep it open and ideally we don't want to move it. Tatters like to tat everywhere, on a long flight, on a short flight, on the train, in the waiting room at the doctor, pretty much wherever we can. An open skein is very tricky, I would say impossible to transport successfully. A centre pull ball, as the name implies, pulls from the centre. This keeps the rest of the ball neat and tidy. They're compact, they're transportable, definitely more user-friendly than a skein. So how do we transform this to this? Well, I use an umbrella swift and ball winder. Now, I realise not everyone has these, but for those who do, let's check out the equipment setup first. Then we'll take a look at other ways we can wind balls without any equipment. The umbrella swift clamps to a table, or in my case, a winding board. Just be careful what you're clamping the swift to. The metal tilting plate will leave ring marks, especially in timber, and especially if you do it up tightly. There's a little spring-loaded lever here. Some swifts have a push button instead. Squeezing the lever releases the catch, which allows me to open and close the swift. To set up the ball winder, this is our thread guide. I'll just show you underneath. Pull the guide around and lock it into place. Then we secure it to our winding board with our little wing nut here. We are now ready to wind. Grab your skein, cut your tag off and open it up to the big loop. We're now going to place that over our swift. Hold your skein out to one side so that it doesn't just fall to the floor, and use the spring-loaded lever to extend the umbrella arms. All skeins will have some kind of tie on them. Your new best skein has one like this, and then a few ones like that. Grab your scissors and run your scissors parallel to the skein to cut those ties off. So work your way around. We don't want to have our scissors horizontally, because then you run the risk of cutting your good thread. Coming back to the ball winder for a second, this is our thread guide. You can see it has a coiled tensioner. This is what tensions our thread as we wind it, giving us a nice evenly wound ball. Our thread needs to run through the middle of this coil. So grabbing a tail from the swift, we can simply thread it straight through the coils, or we can follow the coil around. Place the tail into the slit of the ball winder. We're going to leave a small amount hanging on the other side of this slit, because this will be the start of our centre pull ball. And now we start, make sure it's secure in your slit, then we can start winding. So start slowly so you can check that nothing's catching and it's actually going to flow. And we want to support our thread with our left hand as we wind. So you don't want to wind too quickly. Keep a nice tension, a nice pace and always crank in the one direction. Now if you need to stop at any point, make sure you stop the swift with your left hand at the same time as you stop cranking, because if you don't, this thing gets a fair buzz up and it's kind of got a mind of its own. So you might stop cranking, it's going to keep going, and you'll end up with a lot of mess. You'll have thread tangled where you don't want to have thread tangled. When we're done, we take our tail out from that slit. Make sure the outside tail is wrapped around your ball, and then use both hands to pull that off. That can now go into our bag with the tail from the centre pull coming out the top, and we put our tag in as well. So we have the size of our thread and the meterage in our centre pull ball. Now, not everyone has a swift and winder. They're not very expensive. Obviously it depends on which one you get, but do you need one? Remember I said you could work from a skein as long as it was set up properly. The key is to have the thread looped around something so it can't tangle while you work. We start the same way as when we were using the swift. Remove the label, open up your skein. Now we need something to hold it open. Jars are okay. They wouldn't be my first choice, but it works if you're in a pinch. Just make sure they have a bit of weight to them so they don't get pulled over as you pull on your thread. Chairbacks and husbands work well, although one is generally a lot more cooperative than the other. I'll leave it to you guys to work out which one is which. If you don't have anyone who can help you, knees are also great, and I'll show you how in a moment. And this is really important, no matter which option you try, maybe you find a fourth option which works better than any of these. Whichever one you use, be mindful of how the thread is coming off the skein. I'm going to use this cotton tape as a pretend skein to explain why that's important. Now the pretend skein isn't as wide as a normal skein, firstly because this is easier to film, and secondly having it on this scale accentuates what I'm trying to show you. So as you start to work from the skein, and this is not how we wind our thread, we want to twist that around whatever is holding our skein, open. If you start to just twist it off the top like this, you can see what happens to the skein, that twist will end up in your thread and make it very difficult for you to work. Okay, back to a real skein. This is the skein we had at the start where I pulled on a tail without having it set up properly and it all tangled in on itself. So we're going to try and straighten this out a little bit. I have a tail here. I'm going to just pull some thread off to give us something to work with and drape the skein over my knees. So I'm going to pull a length of thread. We don't want too much, but just to give us something to start with. And now we're going to wind this on some card. So you can either have card like this. This is just a thin piece of card. I didn't have any thick card, but I've cut a length of that so I can fold it back on itself a few times and make that a little more sturdy. I've also got a roll. It's far too long, but I can wind my skein. I'm going to leave it that length so I've got something to hold on to, and it just makes it easier for me to wind my skein. Once the skein is on there, I would cut this to length to make it more manageable. So I'm going to show you how to wind with this today. Both the flat cardboard and the roll would be wound the same way. I'm going to tape my thread on just to make it a little easier and start to wind. So just do a couple of rounds and then we're going to start crisscrossing our thread. So we're going to angle our roll back and forth because angling it will give us that crisscross, and crisscrossing gives a more secure hold and will help to stop the thread from just falling off the card. So as you come around, move your skein and then continue to wind. If you prefer your thread as a ball, start with an open hand, your thumb up, and let the tail of your thread fall across your fingers. Close your fingers around the tail, turning your hand away from you so you're looking at your outstretched thumb. With the thread in your right hand, we're going to wind our thread around our thumb, working from the bottom right side up to the top left side. I'm going to use the pointer finger of my left hand to pinch the thread just until I get a few wraps. You can see it's fairly loose. I don't want it too tight to start because the thread's going to get more firm as we wrap, and I really don't want to cut off the circulation in my thumb. So as we are wrapping, you can see I'm turning that. I'm doing a few wraps and then turning a quarter turn. Once that's secure, you can actually let that tail go. And just wrap and turn. So as your ball increases in size, you can use the fingers of your left hand to rotate it as you wind. And just keep going until you've finished your skein. Tucking the tail into the base, and on the top we have our centre pull. And that's it. I hope that simplified the skein for you. I'll see you next time. I've got to say it and you're stuffing around. Okay, we right?
All right.
Chairbacks and husbands work well. You missed your cue. You don't want to walk in like Chairbacks and husbands work well. Oh, just however you like.
Transition.
Are you ready? I'm never going to get this done, am I? Husbands can work quite well, or one is usually a lot more cooperative than the other. I'll let you guys work out which one is which. Now, the pretend skein isn't as wide. Already.